World War I, an era of unimaginable violence, a time where soldiers fought in a hellish landscape of mud, blood, and brutality. But what was life like for the men who fought in the trenches? What really happened down there, in the muck and despair that changed the course of history forever? Today we're diving into the shocking realities of trench warfare during World War I, and trust me, what you're about to hear will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about this tragic chapter in history. First, let's talk about the living conditions. When you think of trenches, you might imagine narrow, muddy ditches, but the reality was far worse. Soldiers spent months, sometimes even years, trapped in these waterlogged, rat-infested holes. The trenches were often flooded with rain, turning them into swamps of filth, where soldiers would literally stand in water up to their knees for days on end. The stench was unbearable, a mix of rotting bodies, human waste, and decaying rats. And speaking of rats, these creatures thrived in the trenches, growing to massive sizes due to the abundance of food. Soldiers would often find themselves battling not only the enemy, but also thousands of rats that would feast on the dead. Next, let's talk about the constant fear of death, a fear that never left the men in the trenches. At any given moment, a soldier could be struck down by enemy fire, shrapnel, or the horrors of poison gas. The terrifying reality of trench warfare was that death was never far away. The no man's land, the area between opposing trenches, was a barren wasteland filled with craters, barbed wire, and the bodies of fallen soldiers. Trying to cross this deadly space often meant certain death. Soldiers who dared to leave their trenches to charge the enemy line were easy targets for machine guns and artillery. The constant bombardment was psychological torture, as men never knew when or where the next shell would land. It's no surprise that the average lifespan of a soldier in these conditions was often just a few weeks. One of the darkest aspects of trench warfare was the introduction of chemical weapons, and trust me, this was a game changer. Poison gas, including chlorine, phosgene, and mustard gas, was unleashed on soldiers, causing horrific injuries. These gases would burn the lungs, cause blindness, and often leave soldiers gasping for air in their final moments. The gas attacks were completely indiscriminate, affecting both soldiers and civilians alike. The worst part? Soldiers didn't have effective protection against the gas at first. They would improvise with cloths and rags to cover their faces, but many didn't make it in time. The scars of these attacks, physical and psychological, lasted far beyond the war. The terrifying sound of gas alarms was something soldiers would never forget. Now let's talk about the staggering toll of trench warfare. The war was an endless battle of attrition, where neither side seemed to make any real progress. Armies would push forward a few hundred yards, only to be driven back by artillery or machine gun fire. And this went on, month after month, year after year. The constant fighting wore soldiers down both physically and mentally. Soldiers who made it through a few months on the front line were often broken men, scarred by the horrors they witnessed. The only respite? The rare chance to go on leave, but even then, the memories of the trenches followed them. As for those who didn't make it, tens of thousands of soldiers died in futile battles for land that changed hands several times without any real gain. The senseless loss of life was mind-boggling. Speaking of mental trauma, let's talk about something known as shell shock, what we now refer to as PTSD. The constant barrage of artillery shells, the fear of gas attacks, and the sight of fallen comrades created mental scars that were often more enduring than the physical ones. Soldiers who survived the chaos of the trenches returned home haunted by nightmares, anxiety, and a fear of loud noises. Many were simply unable to adjust to life after the war, having witnessed horrors they could never forget. Back then, it was poorly understood, and many soldiers were dismissed as weak or cowards. But in reality, shell shock was the result of extreme trauma, and its effects lasted for years after the war ended. But despite the unimaginable hardships, there was also something incredible about life in the trenches, the camaraderie between soldiers. In the midst of all the suffering, they formed unbreakable bonds. Brothers in arms became each other's lifelines. Soldiers would share what little food they had, look out for each other during attacks, and even find moments of humor to keep their spirits up. The trenches became more than just battlefields. They were home to a unique brotherhood that endured the worst of human conflict. The stories of these bonds have become part of the legend of World War I, proving that even in the darkest times, humanity's resilience shines through. And let's not forget about the trench art. Even in the most dire circumstances, soldiers found ways to express themselves artistically. Some carved intricate designs into shell casings, others made sculptures from pieces of scrap metal or bone. These small pieces of art were created in the midst of destruction and despair, offering a glimmer of hope in humanity. The fact that men could still create beautiful, meaningful works of art in the face of so much death speaks to the strength of the human spirit. Today, these pieces of trench art are prized historical artifacts, showcasing the resilience and creativity of those who endured the horrors of World War I. So, what really happened in the trenches during World War I? It was a nightmare, a relentless battle of survival marked by unimaginable suffering, loss, and trauma. Yet even in the face of these horrors, soldiers showed resilience, courage, and a bond that could never be broken. The trenches weren't just a place of war, they were a testament to human endurance, to the depths of despair and the heights of brotherhood. And while we may never fully grasp the reality of what those men went through, we must never forget their sacrifice. If you found this deep dive into the trenches of World War I, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more untold history, and leave a comment with your thoughts. What part of trench warfare shocked you the most? Let's continue the conversation in the comments below.